Hello, my name is Michael Keara. I'm a user interface systems architect working with My Planet Digital. And today I want to share some ideas about a graphic notation system for contextual component configuration. And because the word context is, to say the least, ambiguous, it can mean lots of different things to different people. It makes for conversations about planning the UI for the system a little bit difficult. So I thought it would be useful to have a kind of a graphic notation system to help describe what we're talking about with particular scenarios, and also to actually plan pages and relationships among components on a given page. So it could be useful not only for the purpose of these discussions, planning discussions, but even for site builders as well. So I want to start by defining a few key terms. It's always useful to know what we mean when we say certain words. The first one is blocks. What are blocks? I see them as the output of content sources. Content sources are basically things like menus, view displays, or content produced by specific modules, a calendar, for example, search mechanism, solar search, for example. So all those things produce output and HTML or various forms. So let's think of it as HTML for now. What are components? Some people refer to components as smart blocks. Personally, I prefer not to use the word blocks for these items. These are the things that you would place into a region of a layout for a given page. They have a lot of intelligence about them. They have to contain information about the content sources, and therefore they're blocks. And they have to connect those content providers with contextual information, so they have context objects in there as well. So I see them as distinctly different, that I wouldn't want to use the word blocks for them. They're wrappers around these elements: content sources, blocks, and context. And then finally, what are contexts themselves? This is my favorite because I like the word context. I use it in my work all the time. I use it to describe everything around a traffic cone. That's my symbol. Traffic cones are placed into an environment to point to its surroundings. It's the essence of usage context in that sense. So really, context by definition can mean anything, but that's not useful for us. So we have to tie it down to something more specific. And what Chris refers to them as is data sources. So these are sources of data, information that we can use to drive the specific outputs of those blocks, for example, the outputs of the content sources. So there are three kinds, according to Chris. There are arguments where contextual information is provided in the URL or in the path. It's pulled out and then used. There are arbitrary ones, which he now calls custom contexts, where the information is entered sort of specifically or explicitly. And then there are relationships, which are interesting, where information from one content source can be used to drive another one. I'll get into that in more detail because that's a really interesting area. Okay, let me get into the graphic notation system then directly. So we have these three kinds of data sources, three kinds of contexts, and we can basically use those to describe three kinds of components. And what I've done with this notation is I've got a triangle to represent the three facets that can drive the component, three contextual facets, as it were. And I have coming in from the left the argument type. Coming in from the right, there's the custom context, and coming in from the top is the relationship. Now, coming out the bottom is the output. So that, what I've got represented there, it turns off, right angle turn to the right side. That's the HTML output, for example, JSON XML output. Whatever that is, it's going into a particular region. So when it comes out to the right like that, I'm referring to the region assignment. Now, here's an example. There's a little diagram on the left, but then it's used for a specific instance, an argument context for a fixed content component. We want to show a node. And the path on the left is node /123. That would drive this particular component to load that node identified by the number 1, 2, 3. The output, of course, is the node being shown in this case in what I'm calling the primary area. That's a region. Same thing, but exactly the same results, but done differently through a custom context. So now we, instead of passing information through the path, we pass it directly, the node ID, 1, 2, 3. The path is about us. So there's a more semantic path, and the same results can be accomplished. So the output is basically show node 1, 2, 3 in the primary area in that region. And then here's an interesting one because it's dynamic. So in this case we want to show recent blogs by Ellie, our editor. And so the path is carrying the context again, /blog/Ellie. So we have an argument now, and the argument is, in this case, the part that follows the word blogs/Ellie, and that's fed into a view that I'm calling recent blogs. And it uses Ellie as a filtering mechanism, filtering value I should say, and the output of all that is a set of teasers of blogs written by Ellie, and I've put that also in the primary area region. Now here's something along the same lines but a bit more detailed. So now the user's drilled down into a specific post, so the path is extended. We now have another argument. It's about me. That would have to be resolved through some mechanism which I won't go into right now to a particular node ID. In this case I'm calling it 456. So another view perhaps can be used in this component to determine what node that is. The output, again I'm showing it the primary area region, is show node 456. Now this one's where it gets a bit interesting because we have a relationship. Exactly the same as the previous one. In addition to showing the output of that node, we also use the first component to supply information to a dependent component. So we have a kind of a parent-child sort of relationship or dependency relationship. And that second component is going to get the comments. Which comments? Well, it will be the comments for node 456. Now, this doesn't actually show a spatial relationship. This is purely a connection relationship. So I don't want to suggest that just because that dependent one is below the parent one, that somehow it's going to be like that on the screen. It can be whatever you want. It goes to a region. Okay, so this is showing what regions the outputs go to. Now here's something, the same thing, but a little further down in terms of complexity. Exactly the same scenario, but we're also now at the very bottom loading another node, which is associated through that third component with the context that was set by the first component. So the context in this case is node 456. That's the post by Ellie. And we're going to somehow get the author information from that context and use it to load another, perhaps a different content type for biographical material. So I've got get bio for the author. And we're going to load that node, which I'm calling 789, in another region. So in this case I've got it in a secondary area region. So that describes basically the way in which you can use this notation to indicate what the relationships are between different kinds of components. And so basically you can see in this instance we've got argument information coming from the left, and we've got relationship information going into a component from the top. We're not using custom in this instance. Now there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is the idea of controlling the display. When should this component actually be shown in a layout on a given page? So this idea of conditional display context is also worth notating as well. And I've done that by adding this circle on the output vector there. And I'm calling it G1 because it stands for gate 1. I like the word gate for this kind of purpose. And in this case, the gate is the user is logged in. So if the user is logged in, show the comments. That's what this notation means. In this case, we've got two conditions, two possible reasons to show the output. So it's in an OR configuration, and that means it's two parallel methods to determining the output. One is users logged in, and the other is the comments are open. Doesn't necessarily make sense. Sorry, I didn't have time to think of a better scenario than that, but it just means either one of these things would, if it's true, would produce the output, would actually display the component. And of course, we'd want to have the AND version as well, and that's simply represented as two gates shown in serial form. So this makes more sense that you'd show the comments if the user's logged in and the comments are open. It's got to be both, otherwise there's no output. And and of course you can do combinations. You can do combinations of ands and ors as well through this notation. So that's the notation. That's the graphic system. I hope this could be useful in these discussions. And like I said, also when we get down the road, I think we can use this to actually plan complex relationships, or even simple ones, but complex relationships, especially for layouts and site building. Thanks for listening.